Fantastic. Welcome back. So we enter the final stage of this afternoon's discussions, and a really wonderful opportunity to pick up on some of the thoughts we heard earlier this afternoon. And I'm going to pass across to my colleague Lisa, who's going to just guide the questions. And thank you, a big thank you to those people who are not in the room, who are online. We're doing a silent cheer for you. Thank you for being part of this. We're not feeling the energy back, but we'd love to feel the energy back in terms of just some questions you'd like to have answered here. So please do pick up on that, and we'll feed it through here in the way that we can. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Okay. Well, such another round of fascinating presentations, not excluding my own. It's very strange to be facilitating a conversation after I've also contributed to it. But I think what was different from the afternoon sessions to the morning sessions, that we're really contending with how we define art. And that was done so brilliantly, that perspective was woven in so brilliantly by you, Christopher. And that has generated quite a lot of interest online, actually. So I'm going to dive straight into a question that we got online around this, because it is one of the most contentious things. What is art? And whether people feel confident to engage with it because of their understanding of where art starts, where it finishes, who it includes, who it excludes. So getting to a sense of comfort and ease around the conversation of what art is, I think is really important when we're thinking about does art work, because we want everybody to be part of this conversation. So the question goes, Christopher, can you expand on your theory of the meaning of art? I don't know if you gave a whole theory, but you did give us a sense of your perspective. It seems slightly different from many of the speakers' views, which seem to suggest meaning comes through art making as a vehicle for some other end, e.g. individual well-being or self-confidence, problem solving, or societal cohesion. The thing that I was left with from your talk was the final point, was the importance of the muse. So perhaps you can just expand on that.
As you were talking, I was thinking of something very particular. It may not exactly answer the question, but it's in the region. I was brought up in Portsmouth. My father was in the Royal Marines. There's no art in our background at all, but I could draw. Now, when I went up to London, and I was very aware of my mother's idea of London, which you'll be familiar with from Dick Whittington. So her view was that the museum, the great palaces of art in the centre, should be palaces. And if she went there and there weren't steps and a grand portico and a slight sense of foreboding, she wasn't happy.
Interesting.
Now, with the Royal Academy, grand as it is, all the gilding, the point is, it's not to put you off. Neither is it to be welcoming, but it's to show you how much we care about art and how precious it is. It's a sign of its importance. Now, there's a paradox here. Many people find that they're intimidated by it. I think a bit of intimidation's fine. I'm intimidated by it. Absolutely. Where I'm trying to work is utterly contested. Turner's in the room with me. A little bit of intimidation is good. You can overdo the comfort. I think it's mysterious, it's existential, it's all of these deep things. By patronizing it, making it too comfortable, for me, I feel slightly patted on the head. As a young man, I wanted challenge, risk, danger, excitement, and I was territorial. I'm still a bit territorial. But do you see the difference? There are two different things going on here. I think they're both possible, but I'd beware of making it too straightforward.
I'm sure a lot of us have thoughts about this. I saw you to my left, Gabrielle, reacting very physically to some of the things that Christopher was saying. I certainly have your view, but I'm very interested in hearing yours, and of course, Suhair, your perspective on it as well.
Well, I think to weave in, art is best is about complexity, and it's about dark and light. I think I said at the beginning, too much happening, not enough happening. When I'm trying to work out if there's a sufficient homeostasis in my painting, or whether I've got to the point where I think I finished, because often that's the hardest thing as an artist, to know when you've ended, and sometimes you end too soon, and sometimes you go on actually to spoil something. And I sometimes think it's the point of when you've reached a paradoxical state, and it's in which opposites can coexist, because the world is at times very dark, but you can also find light. And I think one without the other actually takes away the very richness, the fabric of us engaging with it. And I think that that's what excites me, that the idea of if there's dark, there's light.
Yeah. Suhair.
Well, I think context really matters. So when you talk about physical structures, what feels accessible and inclusive today will have been different from 20, 30, 50 years ago in London, for example, but also the idea of what is to be experienced. So if you don't have an experience of engaging with art, what you get out of it, versus if you have spent your life, you've grown up, you said you're the first artist in your family. And I think that context and how art is presented and communicated does matter. I think we often take for granted that art should speak for itself.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really nice. I think Nicola said in the first panel that, she doesn't want to have meaning. She does it because it's important to create art, and the meaning is not the purpose of her work. But for the viewer and for the audience, the sort of intentionality of showing up or knowing what you're seeing or having a sense of being comfortable or confident in it, I think does matter.
It's interesting that, because somebody came up to me and said they were kind of relieved that I gave a bit of context to my paintings and began to describe them, because I always felt a pressure that I should know how to react to something without any context. And often you need some kind of immersion to take you somewhere. And we don't always feel that's all right.
And another question that relates to that is, came from a viewer online, is whether it's possible that degrees and the institutions around art perpetuate an elitist judgment of creativity. So again, it relates to this question of inclusion and like you're saying, and how do we democratize the language to access it? Obviously, we don't want to be spoon-fed the meaning. Without that tension, without that questioning and uncertainty, how do we come up with new ideas? But yeah, it's a question for us to continue to ponder upon.
I think, but it's like the first conversation. It's about education and access to education, because, there is like a whole argument to say institutions are too elitist or should not exist in the way that they exist, but everything has its place as long as people feel that there's an avenue in for them, and dumbing it down is also not an answer.
Yes.
But it is fair to say that sometimes in art critiques or critics, the way art is spoken about or written about actually can feel very inaccessible. Something I really liked today was people spoke English. I could understand what they were saying. I think often in specialisms we feel kind of some need to be so specialist it's hardly accessible. And it is about how do we communicate in a very clean, direct way so people know how to relate to it.
Yeah, I mean, for many of the artists that I admire, they have gone on to create new languages that have made people feel that they can contribute to the conversation of art.
Yeah.
Because of their understanding of the historical art world was elitist. So I think there needs to be balance. There needs to be balance.
But sorry, I wouldn't be honest if I wasn't getting a reaction, emotional reaction to what you're saying. Because when I mentioned we were one of only 12, which meant the professor knew each of us,
Yes.
and that there was nowhere to hide, I was terrifically proud of that, actually.
Yeah.
And I felt committed to doing my very best because something was expected. And I think there is a real value in having an elite. But the question is to explain clearly why it is an elite and why those artists deserve to be included in what we might describe as an elite.
Yes.
Another way of talking about it is to talk about the canon. Because most people in this room would expect the canon to include Raphael, Michelangelo, Picasso, Pollock, and so on. But they might also want to understand why they are there. Now, there's nothing exclusive about that. It's open to everybody. But it is a very difficult road, you see.
I don't think the canon has historically been open to all the genius artists in the world.
Well, then we would have a disagreement because there are steps to this place. Now, depending on how Turner was educated, the son of a barber whose mother was so ill she was put in a mental asylum, he became the greatest British painter ever, and he served as the president of the Royal Academy briefly when Martin Shee was too ill. So the circumstance I have in my mind is one almost entirely benign, in which this young boy who was probably seriously dyslexic ended up as such a great painter, and the welcome in the great houses throughout the country. For example, Max Egremont, the present owner of Petworth, he talked about his ancestor getting on well with Turner because Turner was working class, but not getting on well with Constable because Constable was middle class. So that, to me, is a beautiful illustration of the openness of the Enlightenment art world. And so I hold that as an ideal. I'm not associating myself with Turner, I'm just saying the doors were always open. So I think we can overemphasize a feeling that people are excluded, where I've not witnessed it, but I think it is, an atmosphere has been created in which we think it exists. And I think it, my experience at the Tate or the National Gallery or Dulwich or the Royal Academy, I'm not aware of that. But
Well, I think it comes from the eye of the beholder. And anyway, this is becoming, and this is the beauty of having this space for the conversation. I can talk about it from a gender perspective, a cultural perspective. There are many different aspects to inclusion. And I think your point about that perspective on the working class connection shows you the complexity of it. It's not a straightforward conversation. But I have a view that there have been genius artists who, if it weren't for revolutions in understanding of politics and culture over the last 60 years or so, wouldn't be included in canons of great art literature that we have now today. But yeah, this is why it's worthy for us to have the
Can I add a
debate.
little provocative edge?
Yes, please.
Which I can never resist, but I think that, artists are iconoclasts. I think as much as we like the language of inclusion and wanting everybody in, we love being elites. We actually rather revel in the idea that maybe we're a bit better than somebody else.
Yes.
So we're not always that benign on the interior about giving equal space to everybody. And I think there's a constant tension and fight inside ourselves on this.
Yeah. And then those who do get included then often replicate the things that we're hoping for them
Well,
to.
I worked so hard to get to this place, so why should I let someone in so easily?
That is something that definitely exists. But let's turn our attention to the question of, we have to be self-reflective and honest about the situation. But let's talk to the question of AI, which was so interestingly kind of introduced to us through Suhair's presentation, and what that poses for what we fully understand as art. I remember from Christopher's presentation, you were talking about the particularities of that, the quality of the art making, and whether you think that is thrown into question with the machine learning kind of assistance of AI art. Christopher.
Oh, okay.
You thought it was coming here.
I did.
Yeah.
Drifted off.
You know what I was thinking? And
What?
it's
Yes.
too late to not say what I'm thinking. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
I was thinking it's not art.
Yeah.
And right.
I thought you might
someone's
say
got
that.
to say it. Someone's got to say it. And I tell you why. I may be impressed by it. I'm not moved by it. And I do use my emotions as a way of gauging the strength of art. And Shakespeare touches me. But the fact that AI, it's like collaging images off the net. There's no resistance.
No jeopardy?
There's no jeopardy, but there's no physical resistance. When you see the child pushing the crayon across the paper, you see it happening in real time. The paper's resisting, the child's resisting, the crayon breaks. It's stuff. But it's the lack of resistance in the world of AI that makes me, well, unmoved. Impressed, sure. But I'm driven by emotion more than status or whatever.
So here, this is definitely your domain. You've engaged with a lot of artists who leverage AI to create.
So there's many times more AI-generated images on the internet now than there's actual original images. So just as a point of reference, what is it? I don't know. It's material. It's materiality. So AI is designed to remove friction from killing people, from doing A to B to whatever. So however way you think about it, it removes friction, and we cannot live in a frictionless world. Our bodies, as you say, are not designed to be frictionless. So however we think about what art represents, meaning, experience, it can never be complete. It's augmenting, in many ways, our own practice, whatever that might be.
But I don't quite understand that, because AI is going to create a lot of friction. It's going to create a lot of conflict and a lot of exclusion. So say a bit more about AI's designed to avoid friction.
AI is designed to remove friction in the sense of to speed up, to increase, to get from A to Z in sort of an infinitesimal period of time, to write a novel or a bad essay or create a new set of collages without putting effort, time, or thought in is possible with AI. It doesn't mean that people who are not being intentional, not spending time, not doing the research to produce an image are also engaging with these tools. I think sometimes if any of you has used ChatGPT, it can actually be a lot more annoying, because you're like, I didn't mean that. You might as well have just written it yourself and not wasted all this time trying to fix it. But of course, the outcomes of it, and let's say the collateral damage of it, is laid out bare for us to see.
Full of friction.
And I'd say the final point, which has nothing to do with art, is that AI is, the things that manifest from it, or the way it's manifested, has nothing to do with the technology itself. It's about the fact that we have no regulation. In America, that there's like 5 companies and 10 oligarchs who are able to make decisions that impact billions of people around the world. It is about society, it's about government and politics and capitalism. So it's really not about the technology itself. And I think we need to be able to start to extract ourselves from that, because all these debates on like AI and IP and creativity just kind of keep miring us away from the bigger issue, which is a social issue, which is how does government prioritize the rights of creatives or the value of creativity or writing. That's completely separate from what is AI.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'd like to turn the question opportunities to the audience. We have space for about 3 questions, I think, or more, maybe. But yeah, there's a hand up just right there.
Is it on now? Right.
Yeah.
It's a question about AI, and there's a phenomenon of AI hallucinations where, when there's not enough information in the data set, it's been noticed that AI makes up the answer, which can have catastrophic implications. And linking that into education, there have been instances where generated fictional papers have started to occur as references in peer-referenced articles. And I'm just interested to hear on the views on how we can mitigate that.
So I just want to be careful to keep it coming back to art, and so we can always talk offline. But most of these systems you hallucinate, they're also biased. There's bias built into data sets that go into them and bias that comes out of it. It could be gender, racism, complete misinformation, lies. There's also misinformation just on the internet. So there's a whole field of research into pseudoscience and academic journals that have propagated the return of measles to Europe. So AI is pulling, in many cases, from data that's already out there, but also these systems can break. So I'm happy to talk about that separately.
It was in reference of an art setting that I came across that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, again, to come back to education, is we need to be aware of that. I mean, people always say we need more critical thinking with AI. It's like a thing for people to say, but, you know, obviously, like, we should be thinking about how these tools change the way we work. My opinion on the kind of the creative dimension is, outside of hallucinations, I think most of these technologies reduce our expectation of what is good enough. What is a good enough image or song or video or film? And maybe eventually they will be so good and so much better. But right now I think it's faster and cheaper, and the good enough is becoming less and less good. And who defines what good is a separate conversation.
But I actually agree with what Christopher was talking about, the value of the emotional impact that really amazing art stimulates. And I think there's always going to be a way for us to distill the distinction. I'm praying so anyway, but I have faith that it will. Any more questions? Yes.
As a visual fine artist, yeah, I think there are many of us who are concerned about copyright, obviously. And following up from what Christopher said, was defined truly great art. I mean, I don't want to talk about context because it's quite controversial, but the specificity and the purity of the artist's vision. And do you feel that, apart from copyright, that AI can get there, can actually arrive at a place where that specificity is as great as the human mark and thought and vision?
I have a Substack, which I just wrote a piece on organoid intelligence, which is about AI, which is starting to map to the biological functions of our organs, which maybe you know more about. And so will we get to a point where we're able to, in whatever way we define that nuance of feeling and friction, and you know, the brain is more, the intelligence is more than cognitive, will we get to the point where that's what the outcome is? I doubt it, but there's a possibility that we do get there.
Well, I'm comforted that you doubt it.
Yes, Chris.
Well, very recently, I was at an awards ceremony in Liverpool for John Moores University. And so I was able to watch the students as they came onto stage. And it was an extraordinarily moving thing, because I think during the morning, something like 400 or 500 young people, aged 22, came across the stage. And many of them were wearing unsuitable shoes, so they were already nervous, and that made it worse. A lot of the young men didn't know quite what to do. What was extraordinary about all the encounters in this very formal occasion was the astonishing variety of the individuals that arrived. I mean, the old-fashioned expression is human souls, but it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And every single person coming across that stage, different identity, different family, different future, different past. Now, just hold that thought. We move to AI, right? AI will do some wonderful stuff for us at a basic level. But coming back to my point about whether I'm moved by it, I'm moved by the individuals in all their difficult specificity. I'm unmoved by the generalized. The generalized is a danger. The generalized gets into politics. You know, are you left, are you right, are you middle, where are you red or blue? And that's always lowering. The trouble is how to keep the complexity and variety of what's called the manifold. Every child is different. The differences are produced continuously and endlessly and never the same, ever, ever, ever. That's an extraordinary thing. And that's the human spirit. But the AI is starting to generalize, and I think you were talking about the good enough starts to lower and lower and lower. I think that is a danger. So as an artist, it's the mess. It's the out of control not knowing. It's still being able to be a teenager in your 70s, because teenagers are still discovering who they are. They're very brave. That was the other moving thing. The bravery of the young is what we need, you see. So sorry, I've gone slightly off topic, but I just do think there's balance against holding on to the individual, and art is a mark of the individual. At a very high level, it's a mark of something to aspire to. So again, I'm going off topic.
What I hear you saying is, how do we hold our humanity in the face of AI? But I wonder if we have to look at being human in different ways, because this is the world we're going into. So we do know, for example, in old age homes, people love their AI-generated friend, and they relate to them. And even when I go on to ChatGPT and I'm feeling rather guilty, it says things to me like, I put in something I've written, oh, I love how empathic it is, or how sensitive. And I'm making a relationship with them because they're actually already responding to me. And I'm thinking, this is impossible. But, you know, I want to go on again because they're being so nice to me. So I just think we're going into a world where things are going to happen in a different way, and it's going to surprise us.
Yeah.
And a way in which we appreciate the ways in which AI technology, machine thinking, impacts how humans think and produce, which is already happening. It's having that influence. So it's not really about having this binary sense of this is AI, this is us, because, you know, many of the artists that I really love, for example, they use YouTube and different online media to create phenomenal film, for example. You don't think of that as AI art. I certainly wouldn't classify it, but they're leveraging the tools of AI technology into their mode of creation. So it's just about us having a nuanced understanding.
Well, I'm thinking of the developmental mind. We're going to have to rewrite all the theories around it. You know, how social media has shaped our minds, what we think relationships mean
whole
in the
generations
future.
Being influenced in that way.
It's a book.
Any last questions from the audience?
Interestingly, I think Christopher just made an argument for multiple voices, which he was arguing against earlier. So there's a little twist. What I want to ask about is, I think half answered, because I think the problem with AI is if AI takes over. Because and you were talking a little bit about the embodied bits of AI, that there's contact with the embodied bits of AI, but there's lived life that AI will never have. It doesn't exist in the temporal way that we exist. And there's time touching time, and the way that we, as human beings, fall through time, through contact with material and life. And that's what's special about humanity. So AI, when it's used in a human way, with a humans in a human-centered as a tool, just like computers were, just like a book was when it was first invented. All the new technologies are threatening, but you have to have the human center, and that's where the art lies. isn't it?
I don't think I argued against multiple voices, did I?
Well, I think when you talk of a
Think of-
canon in the
Yes.
way that you did talk of a canon,
Yes.
then yes, you do, and that was addressed by our host.
Well, sorry, my idea of the canon is extremely multiple and vast and extends a long way back in time and across
And
regions
across
in history.
gender and across countries.
Of course it does.
Okay, because that wasn't clear in the example.
Can I ask
Yes.
a question? 'Cause
Yes, please,
it's
Suhair.
really nice to have the AI question. I have a question. Can I ask about psychotherapy?
Psychobabble.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
conflict, and
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Okay, just kind of, because it was really amazing to hear about the space that you've created for art, but actually you didn't speak about really how that other whole part of your brain works and how right now you're engaging. we
You mean
talked about
in conflict resolution?
conflict. Yeah, but like in your work, exactly, like beyond the art that you're creating, how are you actually channeling that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Suhair.
Yes, oh gosh, it's a big question.
Yeah.
And it's a very urgent
I mean, it's
one
a
for
whole
now.
nother thing to be spoken about. But I think what I was trying to say is if you think like an artist, you're used to disruptions, you're used to living in contradictions. When you were challenged that you were contradicting yourself, I thought, thank goodness. Because actually most of our responses are not rational, they're emotional. And the emotional tells us something about what we feel, what we care about, and then we try to elevate it to rational thought. Now, in conflict, when terrible things have happened to people and people have died and lost members of their community, they are full of emotion. And when they're full of emotion, they often don't actually do what's in their best interest. So once you're in the height of war, Ukraine war, for about 3 years, Ukrainians did not want to think about a peace process because they'd lost so much, they sacrificed so much. And I suppose what helps me in this is the messiness of both being an artist and a psychotherapist helps me understand much more people's states of mind and why they're not ready for peacemaking. And our job is how do you write in these conditions? And it's something that we don't think about enough. How do you get to the point where people do what's better for them? Because we're now living in a world where people don't seem to be doing that. I think I'll just end with, if you put into ChatGPT, how do you end war? It says the destruction of human beings. And what that speaks to is our emotional immaturity and how we find it so difficult to live with contradictions and complexity, and maybe all the things that art at its best contains.
Well,
Thank you.
that's a really powerful note for us to end on, which is the possibility of human empathy and understanding that through the creative process to navigate all of society's challenges. Yes.
Actually, when Johnny comes to talk to me, he's always saying, do you think art is about empathy?
Yes, I
And
know.
I usually say no. It is in part about empathy, but it's also about managing radical disagreements and conflict. So, and often we can't manage that empathy. So it's like, how do we contain all of that?
Containment of empathy as opposed to
And
management.
disruption and conflict and not such good emotions.
Well, what an intriguing end to our conversation that's been so rich. Thank you, Gabrielle, Suhair, and Christopher, for your wonderful contributions to this conversation, which will be ongoing in all our lives, no doubt. Thank you all for being a wonderful audience. Do you want to come and say a few last words, Johnny?
Should we wrap it up?
Shall I wrap it
I
up?
want to say, what a brilliant set of four minds. Guys, this is an amazing privilege to be part of this conversation. So thank you all for bringing what you do so brilliantly in your own perspective worlds into this place together. And just in love with our online audience, they're just great. It's a really profound moment, I think, for us to start a conversation here. I want to thank you for being part of it. I'd like to end on an optimistic note that, to my head, everybody here has worked through problems in one way, shape, or another, and is continuing to work through problems. And one of the most beautiful, and I use that word exactly, beautiful thing, is finding solutions in whatever shape they come. And I think, to some degree, all of these respective projects are about finding solutions. And that, in my head, is fundamentally beautiful. So if it's an advocacy for what art can do, we're in the practice of doing it here. And so thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.